Okay. Today for maths, there's nothing that you have to do except keep your eyes on the video and switch those brains on. I'm going to only introduce this topic, okay? Fractions on a number line. It's not going to be extensive. It's not going to be every single fraction that has ever existed. I'm just going to show you some of them to try and get the idea in your head of how it works. Now, when we have a number line, grade 2, do you remember that we put 2 arrows on each end? Because it doesn't matter what number you will ever get, there will always be a number in front of it and there will always be a number behind it, even if you get 0. I know it doesn't seem that way, but yes, there are numbers before 0. Okay, so a number line should always have 2 arrows on each end. Now, let's say we start with 0 and the next one is 1. When we talk about 1 in fractions terms, it means a whole. 1 means I have an entire whole. Okay, I have an entire circle. How many circles do I have? 1. Good. How many circles do I have here? 0. So I don't have to draw a circle. If I put a line right in the middle between 1 and 0, what would this tell me? Here I had a whole circle. Before I have nothing, I have a half of a circle. So, I have a half of a circle. Remember when we count, this is forwards counting, this is normal counting. So the number goes, when we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's exactly the same with fractions. The numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. A half is between 1 and a 0 because it's not an entire 1 yet. It is only half of 1. So 1 over 2, right? The 1 tells me how many parts. Well, 1 part of how many? 1, 2. So a half is between 1 and 0. Now, what happens if I put 2 more lines here? Now we need to figure out a fraction that is smaller than a half but not nothing yet. Okay? Stay with me. So we can divide it in half like we did for this one, but we can't color each side because then it's just the same as a half. So we split it up again. Now we can't color 2 because then we just have a half. So now we color a bit that is smaller than a half but bigger than nothing. And what is this fraction? 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So the half of a half is a quarter because it is smaller than a half but it's bigger than nothing. Now we need to count on. The number needs to get bigger. The fraction needs to get bigger. The part that gets colored must get bigger. So we had small, then it extended to half. Now we need something that is smaller than an entire whole but bigger than a half. So once again, we can draw our line in the middle to keep that, but we can't color each side or either side because we already have a half. So we split it once more. Now, we can't just color this one because it's smaller than a whole, which is what we want, but it's not bigger than a half. And the numbers need to get bigger as we are counting. So now we color another one. Is this bigger than a half? No, it's exactly the same. We need a fraction that is bigger than a half, but not an entire whole yet. So we color another part. And now we have a shaded area that's bigger than a half, but smaller than a whole, and that is 1, 2, 3 blocks that we colored of 1, 2, 3, 4. So between a half and 1 is 3/4. Okay. Now, this might seem very random to you, but think about it this way. There are things that exist called equivalent fractions. So if we were to count like this, 0, 1/4, so 1/4, we could say 2/4 instead of a half. 1, 2, 3, and we could say 4/4 for a whole. As soon as the number at the top of the line and the bottom of the line are exactly the same, we have a whole, because that means you have colored all of the parts, so there's nothing missing. This is an entire whole. 2/4, remember we said an equivalent fraction means if we times at the top, the number must be the same at the bottom. So let's see. 1 times 2 gives me 2. 2 times 2 gives me 4. The fact that these two look exactly the same means it is an equivalent fraction. So instead of saying a half, we could only say 2/4. Let me show it to you more clearly on a new number line. If I said, label this number line, and I gave you 3 little lines. Please don't get confused and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, so it's thirds. No. Don't get confused with that. This also counts as a fraction. The 1 also counts as a fraction. The 0 actually as well. You could say 0/4 if you really want to. But what you mean by 0/4 is this. And that's basically nothing, because nothing has been shaded. But if you want, you could see it as 0/4. We know a whole is 4/4, because it means I had 4 parts and all 4 of those parts are colored in. Okay? So a whole is when the number at the top and the bottom are exactly the same. So here we have our whole and our nothing. Now we have to fill in the ones in between. 0, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. Alright, and you can do that with any number. Let's say I asked for you to do this with eighths. I said complete this number line by counting in eighths. Fine. You would go, okay, I know 0/8, and I know this will be 8/8 because it's a whole. Now I need to go find the ones in between. Let me just, quickly. Sorry, I just want to work out where to space my things. Okay, now we write. We had 0/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8. 4/8 can also be known as a half. 2/8 can also be known as a quarter. And 6/8 can also be known as 3/4, which brings us right back to this number line. So, basically what I'm saying, any fraction exists between 0 and 1. You just need to figure out what it is that I'm asking, and then you count normally, but remember, the denominator must stay the same, depending on what I'm asking you. Okay, there's one more thing that I wanted to mention before we move on to our handwriting. And that is that, let's say I ask you to fill in the fractions between 2 and 3. Okay? Now, to explain this to you, what I'm basically telling you with 2 and with 3, if the number 1 meant that I have one hole. Then the number 2 means that I have 2 holes already. I already have 2 whole circles. And the number 3 means I already have 3 whole circles. You need to now fill in the numbers in between to get from 2 circles to 3 circles. Okay? So what happens? In the middle of these two, I will have, like we said at the top, a half. I will have 2 and a half, because I already have my 2 holes. And now it's just the normal counting that we've been doing the whole time, except I have to put those 2 halves at the beginning because that is what I have to work with to get to 3. So I have 2 and a half circles. This one was a quarter, but now I can't just write a quarter because a quarter means I only have this. And this is way smaller than 2. And we don't count 1, 3, 2 because 2 is smaller than 3. It has to switch. So we have to keep in mind that we already had 2 holes to begin with. So now we have 2 and a quarter. And here we will have 2 and 3/4, and then once all of them have been filled, we will have 3 holes. So let's quickly take a look at it. Okay, we had 2, then we had 2 and a quarter, then it got bigger, 2 and a half, then it got even bigger, 2 and 3/4, and then we filled the entire thing to 3. Okay, fractions that look like this with a big number, let's say 6 and an 8, with a normal number and a fraction are called mixed fractions. Okay, because it's not just a fraction on its own, it has a number with it. Fractions like we've been doing this whole time, like 1/8, a normal fraction is called a proper fraction. And fractions, some fractions exist where the numerator is bigger than the denominator. And these are called improper fractions. Okay, this is just a little tidbit. You don't need to know that. I just wanted to broaden your horizons a little bit when it comes to fractions. So I hope you kind of understand the number line concept. Tomorrow we will do some worksheets on it, and hopefully you will be able to see it in practice then. Okay, handwriting.